Absolutely. Well, sorry, to go on to more boring matters that aren't Sex and the City related, we're recording this on a rewind table in the projection room of the UK's oldest operating cinema, and I want to talk a little bit about projection, because it's a matter close to your heart, and there's a good chapter. It's kind of spread throughout the book, but you're very sort of pro the care of projection and the presentation and whatnot, and the idea that there should always be a projectionist showing the film, no matter what format it is.
Yes, that's the key.
And so, as someone who runs a cinema and faces the sort of the economic reality of it, and we do have 35mm projectors and digital projectors here, and when we are showing 35mm, we have a projectionist, but often, not always, but often when we're showing a digital film, we don't find the need to have someone up here, and I think obviously we commit mistakes as all cinemas do from time to time, but I think mostly we do take great pride in the presentation. Is there an argument for perhaps the digital side of it being allowing cinema some breathing room commercially to do all the great things that we want to do, that we can't afford to if we had someone up here full time, for example?
Well, look, I think there's no doubt that the future is digital. I think there's no doubt that many movies have benefited from digital distribution that simply wouldn't have been distributed as widely had digital distribution not existed. There are a million economic and also environmental reasons for it. You're not shipping prints around.
Yeah.
So we all know that stuff.
And not to interrupt, but there's movies who've been that have done badly because they didn't, like Moon. It didn't do badly, but that movie was something people wanted to see for weeks and weeks here, but we had to send the print somewhere else, as if we'd had it on the hard drive.
Sure. I don't doubt for 1 minute that digital is the future, so that's clear. What I have been sort of outraged by is the rush to do away with projectionists because digital allowed it to happen. Now, I think that in the end, things will reconfigure as far as how projection boxes are run. And I understand exactly what you're saying about economic arguments. I did a talk at Cheltenham the other day, and somebody raised a question. They said, look, maybe you've just had bad experiences. Okay? So I think most people in this room probably haven't experienced the projection problems you've experienced. And also, when they do have them, all you really need is somebody with a bit of technical know-how to fix it. So I said, okay, straw poll, how many people in the last 6 months have experienced projection problems like I've talked about in the book? And about 2/3 of the room put their hand up. And I said, fine. And as far as the person you're talking about with enough technical know-how to do it, that's called a projectionist.
Yeah.
Now, it may be that the projectionist will serve other functions as well, because clearly, when you're not talking about real changes, or you're not talking about with real changes with cake stand projection anyway, but you are talking about manning a print through a projector.
Making up prints, breaking down prints. Yeah.
It's a much more labour-intensive thing. But at the heart of it is exactly what you said at the beginning, is the care and attention paid to the presentation.
Yeah.
And for me, at the time that I was writing the book, and I still hang on to this, the idea was like, we don't need projectionists anymore. It wasn't that, that we can reconfigure how they're working as, it's just we don't need them.
Yeah.
And some cinemas, I think quite sensibly, dealt with the challenges of digital and understood what digital meant and understood that it requires care and attention like anything else. Other cinemas, and it's largely, I have to say, the multi-screen, multiplexes, just went, we can, therefore we will.
Yeah.
That led to cases like, again, I'm sure you know, Peter Farrelly going to see Hall Pass in a multiplex in America and discovering that it was 70% light loss because they were projecting it through a Sony digital projector that had a 3D lens on it. They couldn't take the 3D lens off because there was nobody in the 10-screen cinema who's qualified enough to change the lens on the projector. The amount of times I've been at, take for example, the Empire Leicester Square is a wonderful cinema, digital projection there, and Dave Norris, who contributed greatly to the book, the thing he always said is, look, if a digital projector breaks down, you need somebody who understands how the projector works, and that's not the cinema manager, that's not the guy running the suite counter.
Funnily enough, what happens these days is that, for example, our support team, Arts Alliance, they can remotely and I know you're not going to want to hear this, but remotely from London can log on to our server and fix the problem from London. No, but that said, we still have a full-time, Jimmy, he's been here 35 years and he's a full-time projectionist and he's not going anywhere because we need him to do all this stuff. But in a way, that's it. The point is, I'm not trying to dictate how people economically run their cinemas. And I am very conscious of,
The cinema that I'm a patron of, the Phoenix in East Finchley, there's a 35mm on the digital, and I know the digital projector is used much more because 35mm is in some state of obsolescence. But it's the principle of having to hand somebody who understands what projection means. And being a projectionist now is very much about IT. It is much about, but it is an art and a craft. And underlying it is that the cinema believes in its management that the most important thing is that image is right. Yeah. And I do believe, on a philosophical level, that there are cinemas running around the country in which the people run do not care.
No, I agree with you.
And that's what I object to.
I agree, and I think the multiplexes, I think the projection is just one element. They don't care about the quality of the seats, of the food they're selling, of the staff they hire.
That conversation you have in the book is infuriating.
It is.
Right. And we've
all been there. I went down to the local multiplex the other day and saw Midnight of Paris completely out of rack. Exactly the same thing. Owen Wilson's head was up to here.
My favourite line of that thing was, I said rack, he said we can't rack it while the film's playing. You can't rack it while it's not playing. It's like holding the needle over a record and going, how does it sound? I don't know, put it on the record. I've got no idea how it sounds.
Okay. Well, I think we agree and we disagree on both levels. I think ultimately presentation is everything. And if the film isn't working, everything else, we might as well just go home.
Exactly. And again, as I've tried to say in the book, for me, what happened to projectionists was talismanic of what was happening to cinema as a whole. In the end, the problem is much wider than that, and that's not necessarily the single solution. But it was this idea that within a very short space of time, cinemas just went, we can, therefore we will. That's why at the beginning of that chapter I quote
the Jurassic Park
line. And why, I was in your scientists were so busy figuring out what they could, they never stopped to think if they should. Why, when I went to the Turbine Hall of the Tate Modern to talk to Tacita Dean, who's just done this installation film, which is a massive, great big 35mm film projection with all the effects done in camera. What she was saying is the same thing. The problem is not digital. The problem is that you can't throw out 100 years of experience about presentation and just imagine it's not going to damage cinema. I think, again, as I say in the book, what's going to happen is cinemas that care about presentation, about the way things are projected, are the cinemas that are going to thrive. The other cinemas that don't care are going to be flattened by the fact that we all know simultaneous distribution is coming. In fact, it's here now. It's called piracy. It's the cinemas that will ride this out are the cinemas that care and understand that in the end, when the patron is in the cinema watching the film, that needs to be perfect. And if it isn't, they've got no reason to come.
I agree. Quick last question before we go. Yep. We're doing a John Carpenter all-nighter on Halloween night.
Excellent.
Favorite John Carpenter movie?
Well, I absolutely love The Thing, and funnily enough, I read Anne Bilson's book about The Thing again just recently. I know that it bombed when it came out, and people were kind of mean about it, but I remember...
Prequel coming out?
Pardon me?
The prequel's coming out?
No, I know. But I remember that there was that's a fantastic moment. And everybody's quoted this, that when the head falls off the floor and it falls onto the table and the legs sprout out and the guy says, can we swear on this podcast?
Absolutely.
And the line is, you've got to be fucking kidding. And that was one of the greatest lines of cinema because it was exactly what everyone was thinking. And I mean, that was at a time of plastic reality when, that's the kind of thing that led to Brian Usner, and, it was basically polymethylcellulose technology being stretched literally in that way, and it reminds me of something that Clive Barker said. Clive Barker was talking about special effects, and it was a documentary I did years and years ago about the horror movies. And Clive Barker said this thing. He said, if special effects are dictating the movie, that's the tail wagging the dog. He said, but on the other hand, there is a real joy. This is in the age before digital. There's a real joy being in the presence of a special effects guy with a look on his face that says, we've figured out a way of turning a guy inside out through his rectum, and we can do it for you in one shot.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Mark. Kermode. I'm John Brownish here.
I'm Will Dix.
Thanks for listening.